Real quickly before we begin, I want to thank this video's sponsor, CarMarshal.com. CarMarshal.com can save you lots of money on buying used or new vehicles, cars, trucks, school buses. If you want to save money, I'll have a link in the description down below. I know I'm going to...
Good evening. Thanks for having me here. My name is Crowley. I'm running for state attorney.
You're Republican?
Yes.
I'm a former prosecutor of 15 years.
Registration?
I worked at the state attorney's office
It's
started
there.
in Collier County.
It's real.
Worked mostly in Lee.
It's
And also
real. I
worked
am
out
a
in Henry
Republican.
County as well. And I did handle some
I
cases
believe
in
it.
Charlotte
But can I
County,
see your
so I got
card?
to see
Is
the
that a
courthouse.
registration card? I don't know who you are.
My proudest moment as a state attorney was being the
You've
junior vice
already met me
prosecutor,
before. I was with
which
Susan
dealt
at
going
the
after the
other
worst of the
meeting.
worst sex
Okay,
offenders.
what are you doing?
We would go after
What's that?
basically
What are we doing here?
child sex offenders to civilly commit them,
I
basically
am
throw them in
recording
prison
the speakers to see what they have to
and
say.
it was a job I loved doing. It was a way to
And
file
I've
the worst
already
of the
called
worst.
ahead of time
People
to see
with,
if I could come, and I was told yes.
If you're
People with many
Yes.
prior convictions. I worked circuit-wide doing that, and it was one of the most rewarding jobs I ever had. As a prosecutor, I did about 100 trials. I prosecuted murder cases, driving under the influence, burglary, rape, kidnapping. I've handled huge dockets, thousands of plea deals. So I have a lot of experience in the system. Like I said, I used to work there for 15 years. I started when Joe D'Alessandro was state attorney. I guess that makes me old. Also, I had received the recent endorsements of former Sheriff Jim McDougal and Rod Shope, and the Glades County Sheriff was nice enough to endorse both myself and Ms. Fox. So I also like to say that I have the endorsement of the people. Particularly, I appreciate your help. We collected 8,000 signatures to get on the ballot, and your group was very helpful. I appreciate that. We did the ballot petition method. So I'm sorry, I keep taking my glasses on and off. I'm the current Lee County Republican State Committeeman, but I'm not going after clubs on issues. I love the clubs. Okay. Well, it's still in the circuit, sure. It's nice up here. Last June, I completed 20 years in the Army Reserve. I've been called up 5 times to active duty in the last 20 years. I'm currently a Lieutenant Colonel in the U.S. Army Reserves. At first, I was in the artillery when I was in law school, but I got smart. I transferred over to the JAG Corps. I'm currently a Lieutenant Colonel in the Army Reserve, and 2004, I did spend a year in the desert, Iraq and Kuwait. And probably the most interesting thing I did is I got to meet Saddam Hussein's nephew. He was in custody, and he just wanted to chat with somebody, and he saw that I was an officer, so he thought I could get him out of there. No, he was a nice guy, but I saw him from a distance. 2 different. Okay. Nice guy at that moment. Okay. Why am I running? I'd like to get a lot tougher on crime. Violent crime is on the rise. Yes, overall crime is down, but violent crime is on the rise, particularly in Lee County. You can see the morning paper, morning news. We do have a violent crime problem, and it is going up. It's even gone up in Collier County. Everybody thinks Naples is pristine, but there's increases in rape, robbery, and murder. And I think I'm very concerned, and that's why I'm running. I'd like to get tougher on violent criminals and repeat felons. I do think the state attorney's office needs to work closely with law enforcement. Probably one of our worst neighborhoods when it comes to crime is the Dunbar neighborhood in Lee County. It's pretty rough. And 2 years ago, they set up a task force to fight crime in it. The state attorney's office didn't participate. 2 years ago, front page news in the Fort Myers News Press, huge feature article, please read it, November 2016. Many arrested, few convicted. That has to stop. If a law enforcement agency or a group of law enforcement agencies set up a task force to fight crime, the state attorney's office needs to be in it every single time. So I want to see us constantly work with law enforcement. Not on some cases, and hey, state attorney's office has done a great job on some cases, but other times they've missed it, and they've missed the point, and sometimes the state attorney's office just doesn't get it. If you can, Google the article. It was pretty impressive. It was very long and very detailed. From November of 2016, Fort Myers News Press, many arrested, few convicted. I'd like to see better training for the prosecutors. Right now, basically, the training for prosecutors are boring lectures. They give you a file and they throw you into court. I'd like to see good practical training. Believe it or not, in law school they don't teach you how to try a case. They don't teach you how to be a prosecutor. The office needs to do that. And what you see is a lot of prosecutors quitting. It goes up and down, but back in 2008 they had a problem with too many prosecutors quitting. I'd like to stop that by better training. I'd like them to be prepared to go to court. A lot of times they're not, and it's sink or swim, and a lot of people sink. Fortunately, some swim. I'd like to see tougher sentences for repeat offenders, violent offenders, and full cooperation with federal authorities on illegal aliens. That's been a problem. That's my #1 priority in the state attorney's office. I do notice that about 2 years ago, right before election time, the state attorney's office started shying away from tough cases. The Ryan Modell murder case, the Matthew Walker case here in Lee County, where someone from the state attorney's office stood up and told the grand jurors inappropriately, if you indict, we'll lose the case. And the Charlotte Sun won the Pulitzer Prize for calling the state attorney's office guilty of sabotage. That's not right. If I'm state attorney, you're not going to see that nonsense. When Matthew Walker, his killer should have been prosecuted. Apparently the state attorney's office didn't want to take that case to trial. The Charlotte Sun did a series of investigative pieces and called it sabotage by the state attorney's office. And in 2015, they were awarded the Pulitzer Prize for their investigative coverage. If I'm state attorney, nobody's going to win the Pulitzer Prize for investigative coverage about how we sabotaged a grand jury. Yes, I'm calling for change. I think we need a different attitude at the state attorney's office. The Ryan Modell case, a man who was shot running away from a house, and they called it stand your ground. That should have been prosecuted. In that case, they wouldn't even bring it to a grand jury, and that was wrong. Ryan Modell was an innocent victim, and for whatever reason, the state attorney's office wouldn't even bring it to a grand jury. And then we have a rash of animal cruelty cases in 4 illegal slaughterhouses in East Lee County, and the state attorney's office won't touch it because they claim that some evidence was illegally seized. When you videotape someone in public, there's no expectation of privacy. Those cases could have been prosecuted, and those slaughterhouses are still illegally operating, and that's a crime. The state attorney's office totally dropped the ball on that case, and now you've got these horrendous illegal slaughterhouses where they sell horse meat, and they breed dogs for fighting, and they tear apart animals alive. It was all on, you can check out the Animal Recovery Mission's investigation. And one person was prosecuted for misdemeanor for letting a pig become dehydrated. That's not good enough. I want everyone in this room to expect the most from their state attorney's office, and you're not getting it now. Now here's a major issue too. Right now, the conviction rate for the state attorney's office is about 39%, 38.5. We went to the clerk's office. I hate to read it, but Charlotte County 2016, there were 13,311 charges. Total Charlotte County arrests resulting in adjudication of guilt, 5,165. I have a handout. I'm glad to share it with you. That's a conviction rate of 38.8%. That's not good enough. If the cops aren't making good arrests, you work better with them. You set up training seminars. When I worked out in Henry County, how's my time doing? I got 2 minutes. We had a lot of problems with officers out in Henry County who weren't making good drug arrests. So we put on a series of seminars on how to make better drug arrests. When I worked in Naples, the Naples police weren't making good domestic violence arrests. So Christine and Grider and I, she's now a judge, we went down and had a seminar on how to make a good domestic violence arrest. If the cops aren't making a good arrest, you work with them to make better ones. A 38.8% conviction rate for Charlotte County, it's not good enough. We did the same thing in Lee County. 27,494 charges. Total Lee County arrests resulting in adjudication of guilt, 10,586. 38.5 conviction rate. You need to answer that. Okay.
1 minute.
Sorry, 1 minute. Then we looked at the total circuit, and like I said, I have a handout if anyone would like it. 46,122 arrests, but only 18,000 adjudicated guilty. This is fiscal years. This is October to October. 39% conviction rate. That's not good enough. It's not going to be 100%, but I'm asking you to expect more from your state attorney and expect more from me when hopefully I'm your state attorney this year. Bottom line, I want to get a lot tougher on crime. Doing all right? I've got 30 seconds. Okay. My name is Chris Crowley. I've been here before. I know most of you. I've met most of you. If I haven't done it already, I wanted to thank you for letting me speak here tonight. I'd like to take on some tougher cases. I don't want to give illegal aliens a pass because they might get deported. I don't want a double rapist like Jason Sekulic, who got probation, or Matthew Blaine Wilson, who was arrested 31 times and never went to prison, or the Matthew Walker case where the state attorney's office torpedoed the grand jury process. This isn't good enough. I want everyone here to insist the best from the state attorney's office, and they're not getting it for all the cases. Thank you.
Okay, Chris, thank you. Together here, I'm going to bring a mirror back up here. We're going to have a little question and answer period here. So, now, questions for either candidate here. Now, we'll start over here.
There are a few statistics there of 38, 39% conviction rate. I guess to both of you, how does that conviction rate compare to the rest of the state?
Let me answer.
I'm sorry, I was going to leave first.
Yeah, why don't you stand over here first? Thank you. Here?
So I think you all heard the question, how does a 38% conviction rate compare to the rest of the state? I can't answer that question. Our conviction rate is not 38%. Let me clarify what the conviction rate is and how conviction rates work in the state of Florida. Every clerk reports the crime numbers to several places. One of them is the Florida Administrative Office of the Courts. The other one is through FDLE, where we get the low crime rate figures. Those figures are then calculated to show what the felony guilty disposition rate is in each circuit. Our felony guilty disposition rate in the 20th Judicial Circuit is 88%. This 39% is a made-up number. I have a letter from Roger Eaton, your clerk of court, as I do from all the clerk of court, stating that they do not keep conviction rates. That is not what they do. They send the numbers to the Office of the State Court, who crunches the numbers and comes up with the guilty disposition rate, which in felonies in this circuit is 88%. So to take a number and say, oh, the police arrested all these, and then crunch your own numbers, which is what my opponent has done, is a completely false rate. That number does not take into account anyone who was given a withhold of adjudication, which is given many, many times by judges, not prosecutors, to give somebody a second chance and not have a felony conviction. So I guess by that number, he's suggesting that every single person should not even be given the opportunity for withhold, including mental health court, veterans court. That's ridiculous. It also does not include all the cases that are still pending from that year. It's just a completely false number. Our conviction rate, if we had a conviction rate of 38%, I don't think that the 5 sheriffs in our circuit would be endorsing me. That just does not make sense.
Here you go, sir. Here's a handout of the numbers. Please, keep that. These are this we got from your clerk of court with the raw numbers. The only thing we did was plug them in over each other and came up with a 38% conviction rate. The stats we got on discs, he gave us every single case on a spreadsheet from 2016. So you have a copy. If anybody else wants a copy, I'll be glad to. The conviction rate is 38, 39%. That's what it is.
Is that saying that the police isn't doing their job?
I don't know. That's just cases that they're pursued. They're only pursuing 39% of the cases. In addition, for cases pursued, we looked at that. We went to the Administrative Office of the Courts. And this is the 3rd page of your packet, sir. The 20th Circuit has an 86% conviction rate for cases they actually pursue, not the 61% they drop or give withholds or put up. That's number 15 out of 20 in the 20 circuits. That's not good enough. Most circuits, on cases they pick and choose, have a 90% conviction rate or higher. And that's what we need to be. And that's on the 3rd page of your handout. Circuit 20, number 15 out of 20. I'm sorry. I guess I've worked in the court system too long, but Florida is actually divided up into 20 geographic circuits. And there's one state attorney for every circuit. And we're the 20th Circuit, and we're number 15 out of 20. When it comes to cases we actually pursue, it's what we got from the Administrative Office of the Courts was 86.8%, which, like I said, is 15 out of 20, and that's not good enough. All these statistics we gather, all these statistics on the handout, we received from your clerk, the Administrative Office of the Court, or the lead clerk. I'm happy to share it with anyone. It's also on my website, Crowley 2018. You can look it up there. All the raw data came from the clerk's office or the Administrative Office of the Courts.
Any other questions?
Can you guys talk to us a little bit about your views on specialty courts, drug court, mental health court, veterans court, and the proper use of those?
When it comes to first-time nonviolent offenders, probably Ms. Fox and I have a lot of agreement. If somebody's got a first-time nonviolent offense and they've got mental health issues or they're a veteran with PTSD, I have no problem with the mental health courts. What I'm very concerned with is there's a lot of cases that are just dropped. No information, they call it, or no prost. That's where we get the 39% number. My concern while I'm running is because of repeat offenders and violent offenders. And for too often, they're getting a pass from the state attorney's office. I've mentioned some of the cases. We have the numbers, but then we have anecdotal evidence on individual cases. If you're a double rapist, you should not get probation. That's just wrong. That's what happened with the Florida Gulf Coast rapist, Jason Sekulic, who left smiling from the courtroom when he got probation for 2 sexual batteries. Who asked the question? Of the public defender? Nonviolent first-time offenders, I have no problem with the drug courts, the veterans courts. I wish there was a veterans court in Henry County. I wish they'd set up one out there. Alternative sentencing for first-time nonviolent offenders, that's not a problem. What I'm concerned about is the violent offenders. They should be going to prison. They should be going away. And we should not have a 31% conviction rate.
So the operation of the criminal justice system is actually incredibly complicated and takes a lot of thought and really hard decisions to get to where you have, again, it's an 88.1% felony disposition rate. I'm not quite sure where those numbers are coming from. I have all the packets from the Florida State Court Administrator. However, it takes a lot of thought to get to, and Kathy's question was, well, what is your thought on first-time offenders, or what is your thought on drug court? Well, drug court is actually usually not for first-time offenders. Drug court and mental health court are oftentimes for offenders who've been through the system before, been to jail, offended over and over again, maybe even been to prison, and they come out and guess what they do again? They break into your businesses, they break into your homes because they still have the underlying drug addiction problem. And one of the toughest things we do as an office is say, okay, wait a minute, this person needs something more, so they stop victimizing our community. We actually take people who have prior convictions, as long as they're not selling drugs, and we put them into our drug courts and our mental health courts to try to rehabilitate them and hold them accountable, and the recidivism rate goes down when that happens, which keeps you safer. The other thing a prosecutor has to do, Mr. Crowley keeps mentioning all these different cases, we handled 62,000 cases last year, and many of them, and almost all of them successfully. But Kasey keeps mentioning about the rape at FGCU. He has no idea what went on behind the scenes with our Special Victims Unit prosecutors. There are many, many rape cases where we have a victim who's been so traumatized, and I'm not saying that that was this particular case because I can't tell you all the details like that about somebody because of their right to privacy. But I can't tell you how many times we have someone who's been traumatized who comes into our office with perhaps their counselor and says, this person is going to be destroyed for the rest of their life if they take the stand and get stared down by the person who assaulted them. And sometimes we say, we're going to work something out that we think is the best justice for the victim in the case and for the community to keep them safe. So we balance things like that on a daily basis. The Ryan Modell case that my opponent keeps mentioning, tragic case. A young man died. The young man died because he was trying to break into a former Marine's house at 2:30 in the morning where the Marine and his wife were sleeping He tried to break into the house. When the Marine answered the door, the young man got his foot into the door and tried to come in. When the former Marine went outside looking for him, there was a confrontation by the young man who died with some fight language used and an independent witness. And our office found that that is a classic case of stand your ground. In the state of Florida, you're allowed to defend yourself if somebody tries to break into your home. You're allowed to use a firearm to defend yourself. And I stand by that decision. That was a stand your ground self-defense case. It did not need to go to a grand jury. And we will always make sure that we uphold the law. When evidence has been obtained illegally, as in the animal farms cases, we can't use it. We're prosecutors. We're sworn and bound to follow the Constitution and the rule of law. So it's very complicated to be a prosecutor. We have to make really, really tough decisions every day. But the reason we have such a low crime rate comparatively is because we make those tough decisions well to protect you and our community and the victims that we serve.
And it's kind of like we're global. Yeah. You hear we're global, like globally, like we have the highest incarceration rate. And I guess it's an oxymoron by saying in the free world, but you know, and we do have a lot of people in behind bars. A lot of people deserve to be there. Okay, but what's your view? You know, like first-time offenders, and I guess it's a matter of evaluation. But to me, I don't see any answer of reducing the incarceration rate if we have drugs running rampant, people committing capital offenses. I mean, they deserve to be in prison. So I mean, you have any thoughts on our national issue? Because I hear that when we travel. You guys in America have the highest incarceration rate. Well, that's because we put criminals behind bars.
So that's a loaded question. Thank you, Gene. Yes, so we've seen a trend over time in the United States and in Florida. So in the 80s, we got the minimum mandatory sentences for many things, minimum mandatory sentences for drug trafficking, things like that. And a lot of people went to prison. And about 5 years ago, a lot of people in the criminal justice system, longer than that, probably 10 years ago, a lot of people in the criminal justice system started looking and saying, okay, these people are now getting out of prison and they're still offending. Our prisons are full. We need to have room for violent offenders. By the way, Mr. Russell was responsible for bringing us our Stop Turning Out Prisoners legislation, the Truth in Sentencing, where he made sure that anyone sent to prison served 85% of the sentence. So what is now the trend is to look and say, wait a minute, and I think this is really what I explained to you in my platform. There's got to be a way of doing things better with non-violent offenders. How about a drug court for somebody who is a drug addict and keeps getting caught in possession of heroin? How about a drug court for them where they don't take up all the space incarcerated and they don't come out still committing crimes to feed a drug habit? I believe really firmly in that, and I think a lot of the community supports me there. I know our legislature is looking at things like that. Mental health court. Hey, how about we try to treat somebody who has a mental health issue by making sure they take their medication? How about a veteran who has PTSD? Why are we going to send them to prison for a non-violent offense when we can try to help them, make sure they're getting their benefits from the VA, make sure they're taking any medicine that they've been prescribed? It works. Our favorite phone call we get every year in the office is from a young woman who went through one of our specialty courts successfully. She did a 2-year specialty court. Her life was in shambles when she entered, and every year on her anniversary of graduation from the drug court, she calls our office to thank Mr. Russell for letting her do it, because her life is really good now. She turned herself around, she got clean, she has a good job, she has a family. These things really do work. They take an enormous amount of resources, but they're worth it. So I think the answer, I gave a very long-winded answer to your question as an attorney, but I think that we can do better. I think that we have to use our incarceration for violent criminals, because they need to go away for a really long time. So we need space, and we need to try to do better with people who aren't violent and who aren't selling drugs. We need to keep them in our community.
Sure, long term, when it comes to incarceration, that's why I'm a Republican. I believe in educational choice, schools, economic opportunity. I was involved with the Big Brothers Little Brothers Association, and I was helping out this 10-year-old. I'm still in touch with him 10 years later, and I was the only male in his life who ever complained about having to get up for work the next day. Nobody in his immediate family worked. There were really no male figures who worked. His grandfather was around. He was retired. Short term, though, we're going to have to just keep locking up the violent ones. Long term, that's why I'm a Republican. That's why I'm a conservative Republican, most of all. These pathologies you see in some of the communities where it's huge illegitimacy. It seems like certain communities, nobody goes to church anymore. I'd love to see that community be reinvigorated with private charities like the PACE Center or the Big Brothers Association or educational school choice and charter schools. But none of that has to do with running for state attorney. Short term, we're just going to have to lock up some of the violent ones and the repeat offenders, and that's why I'm running for state attorney. We have a growing violent crime problem in Southwest Florida. You're less likely to get your car stolen, but you're more likely to have something very bad happen to you, and I don't wish that on anyone. So as state attorney, my job really isn't to feel sorry for a guy who's on his 31st felony. No, he needs to go away, and he needs to go away for a long time. And maybe that's tough love, but that's just the way it's got to be. I'm running to get tough on violent crime and repeat offenders. Thank you.
Thank you both, and we appreciate you coming this evening. And
Gene, you can have another question?
oh, I'm sorry, Jerry had a question here. I'm sorry, guys.
I got several of them.
Okay. He has several of them.
I was curious about a couple of things. One is that you made a statement about Charlotte's son criticizing sabotage in the office. That's one. And you didn't embellish much on that. I was just kind of curious about that. The other is, should felonies be allowed to vote? And the third is, what do we follow within the MS-13 gang members in this state of Florida, or at least in this your 20th district?
Did you get all those?
Sure. Jerry will remind me if I don't remember.
Okay.
Well, I think the first part of the question was about the Charlotte Sun and their article. So I will say this, I really am astounded to hear over and over again what the media has reported as a platform for a campaign to become state attorney. The state attorney's office is a law enforcement agency. We cannot share with the media everything that we're doing. We cannot explain to the media what happened inside a grand jury room because everybody in there is sworn to secrecy, including us. It's a crime to reveal what happened inside a grand jury room. So it's impossible to address and to defend someone saying, oh, this happened. A grand jury meets in secret. A grand jury, we're their legal advisors, but when they discuss and vote on how to handle a case, we're not even in the room. So in the particular case you're speaking of that my opponent mentioned, the grand jury, 21 people voted, a majority has to vote a certain way, and they decided how to handle the case. So to say we sabotaged it is, I find that incredulous. To say that we don't, to quote the news press on an article, that we didn't work on a task force. We worked on the gang task force undercover with them for 2 years. When the news press came and asked, what task force are you on and what are you all doing? We can't tell them. And we have to take the criticism when they print articles saying that we're not doing anything. So that's my comment on the first part of the question. Now I remember the MS-13 question, the gang question. We do have gang activity. It tends to be more localized gangs that have taken their own names. And sometimes they claim to be a branch of a national gang. Certainly we have some Latin Kings kickoffs. Haven't seen too much of that, although I have heard intelligence that there is some of that type of gang activity. But more locally we see things like the Lake Boys, who form a gang, do a criminal enterprise around the gang where they run a business out of the gang. That's the answer to that one. Remind me of number 2 in the middle, Jerry.
Should felonies be allowed to vote?
So should felons be allowed to vote? Felons are not allowed to vote in the state of Florida. That's the law. The law is if you are a convicted felon, if the judge has not withheld adjudication, if If the judge has adjudicated you guilty of a felony, you cannot vote. And that is our law. So as prosecutors, I think I mentioned this earlier, we're sworn to enforce the law. So whether I agree with the law or not, whenever I get a question like that, I say, I have to tell you, we're sworn to enforce the law. So to us, if somebody were to make a complaint that a felon had voted, we would enforce the law and look for a prosecution on that. So that's how I would answer that question.
If I could just give you a little history. Matthew Walker was an inmate at the Charlotte Correctional Institution, and a correction officer took his boot, shoved it into his larynx, and killed him. Okay. Florida Department of Law Enforcement did an investigation. The state attorney's office, about 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, brought it to a grand jury. One of the grand jurors came forward and talked to the Charlotte Sun, and she said, we were fully ready to indict the suspect until one of the prosecutors, and Ms. Fox was there, stood up and said, well, if you indict, we probably will lose the trial. And they said, based on those statements, which were completely improper, the grand jury decided to change their mind and voted not to indict. And the word sabotage, I'm taking from the Charlotte Sun editorial denouncing the state attorney's office for improper conduct. And it was a series of investigative articles. And this is wrong. You present evidence to a grand jury, I've done it in the Army in an Article 32 hearing, and you let them decide. You don't go up to them and say, well, if you indict, we're probably going to lose the trial. That's completely improper, and that's exactly what happened. And then Mr. Russell threatened to prosecute, I believe she was an 86-year-old woman, for violating the secrecy of the grand jury. They never did, but the facts got out, and the facts showed that there was sabotage, quoting the Charlotte Sun editorial, of the grand jury process. Now, it's been a while since I gave 2 more questions. I don't think felons should vote, but there is a clemency process that they can apply to get their civil rights restored. So they can just go through that process. But no, I don't think felons should vote. If you really want to vote, I've actually met a guy in court. He actually spent the 2 years and got his civil rights restored, and he could vote again. It's done for low-level felonies. Generally, if you're doing 20 years in prison, you're not going to get your civil rights restored. And there was a third question as well.
I asked about, we have a problem down here in Florida with MS-13 gang members.
We do. We have a problem with gang members, and particularly the case I mentioned was Jose Escamilla. Jose Escamilla was a gang member out in Blades County who had been convicted of burglary, and he was not a U.S. citizen, and they were going to deport him. But then his attorney approached the state attorney's office and said, oh, he's got a wife and child, and if you don't resentence him to a misdemeanor, he'll get deported. And then the state attorney's office, and I was involved in these discussions, over my objections, decided to resentence him to a misdemeanor so he'd escape deportation. If I'm state attorney and you're here as a guest in this country and you commit a felony, I'm not going to give you a break. I'm going to cooperate with ICE and federal law enforcement and not undermine it like the state attorney's office has. We've got to stop this nonsense. And when it comes to gang members, whether they're here or they're illegal aliens, sorry, you get the fullest prosecution to the law. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both, Amira and Chris. Thank you very much for coming tonight. And Kathleen, Kathleen Smith. She certainly doesn't have an opponent, so she's just going to tell us what she stands for.
Good evening, everyone. Such a relief not to be opposed. And I want to give each one of you a really heartfelt thanks, because I know many of you in the room and have been the elected public defender since 2008, and I really couldn't do that. I couldn't do the work without the people in this room. So thank you so much for your support. I won't take much of your time. I just wanted to reiterate a couple things. I too am really proud of the fact that we have one of the lowest crime rates in this area, and I'd like to think that my office has something to do with that as well. In that, I mean, we are active participants in drug courts, mental health courts, veterans courts, and things like those. And I will tell you, those are not easy courts. A lot of people like to think that those are kind of like powder puff courts where we're being easy on people. And I disagree with Mr. Crowley in that these are for first-time nonviolent offenders. They are not. All of the research that is out there has told us, excuse me, has told us that you are really looking at people that have behaved rock bottom. You are looking at people that want to make a change in their life. When you look at first-time nonviolent offenders, those people aren't even making it into the court system. They're being diverted out of the court system. Excuse me. So, when we take people into drug courts, we are looking at those people for 2 years. They are coming to court once a week. They're going to counseling. They're going to individual counseling. They're going to group counseling. They are being drug tested randomly. Of course, we're not going to tell drug addicts when we want to test them, or else they might be tempted to try to alter those results. We are making those people actually have jobs. Drug addicts that have been drug addicts for 10, 15 years, those people have not had the ability to hold a job because they're a drug addict. If they do not have a job 40 hours a week, we are making sure that they are getting an education. If they do not go to school, here's what we're doing. We're making them go do community service 40 hours a week. It's amazing how quickly these people find jobs when they are working for free. But my point in telling you this is that we are making people better. When we have drug court graduations, and we definitely fight with the state attorney's office in courtrooms because we have one side, they have another side, and that's what we are doing for our clients. But with these courts, we are working with the state attorney's office to actually make people better. When we see somebody who we had led into drug court, what we do when they are graduating is we show them the picture of when they got to drug court. They are not looking good. This is where they have hit rock bottom. And 2 years later, when they have gained respect back, when they have integrity, when they have their families back, when they are productive members of society, it's a really happy day in the criminal justice system when we see these people graduate. They're coming back into our communities. They may be living next to me. They may be living next to you. And you can be safe. You can be sure that you are safer than just sending someone to prison and turning them back out with no type of treatment. So I fully am in support of the drug courts. And that's why I say I like to think that our office has some small part to play in making our community a safer place as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. I'd just like to tell a story. Teresa and I run the PUNTA History Center. And we have a young lady who had a problem, but she was also, I think, put on community service. And that young lady, and it has been fantastic. She shows up reliably, and she's working off of her hours. And I have to say, if there's an example of a young lady who may in fact have turned herself around, she'd be it. And she's helping in some other organizations too, like the Historical Society. She cleans the women's club. So otherwise she'd be, I think, in big trouble. So it's good to see we have programs like that. Well, that kind of concludes our program, but just one further note. During the month of July and August, we will be having our dinner at Hurricane Charlie's.
Hey Charlotte County, this is Charlotte County COPWATCH, and I just wanted you to know that I am using this stuff under fair use. And also remember to like and subscribe this channel. Also too, keep in mind I do not make any money on YouTube. This is 5 hours work a day, fighting for freedom. And you can donate with PayPal and Patreon. I just want you to think about this. If everybody gives to PayPal and Patreon, Patreon is every month. Actually, PayPal you can do every month. I have 12,000 subscribers. If everybody gives, I can quit my regular job and go full-time investigations on Charlotte County and possibly even more and beyond. So just keep that in mind. If everybody helps out, I can go full-time doing this. Thanks.